Chapter 66. The men perched on the crest of a hill south of the battlefield, 6 of the Caesarians' most powerful magi. Their clothing betrayed none of that, each dressed in the plain clothes of a traveler from his own homeland. 4 Alitarians, 1 Wadrener, and a Modani. Their sturdy pack horses even bore a respectable amount of trade goods, and if their mounts were a little better than most traders would own, they weren't so fine as to attract comment. But if the men's clothes didn't betray them, their bearing did. These were men who strode the earth with the assurance of gods. "This oughtn't be pretty," the Modini said. Antonius Wervel was a short butter-tub of a man with a bulbous, florid nose and a fringe of brown hair combed over his shiny pate. In the Modini fashion, he wore kohl around his eyes and had darkened and lengthened his eyebrows. He gave him a sinister look. "How many meisters you figure they got?" he asked one of the Alitarian twins, Sadin. The gangly youth twitched. Sadin was one of 2 seers in the group, and he was supposed to be spotty. Sorry. I was just, are that man's bodyguards all women?" "Surely not." "They are," Lord Lucius said. He was the leader of the expedition and the other seer, but he was more interested in the opposing side. The Caledonians have at least 10 meisters, probably 20. They're standing close together. "Lord Lucius," Sadin said timidly, "I think they've got 6 Verdmeisters there, back farther in the middle. It looks like they're gathered around something, but I can't tell what it is." The butter-tub humphed. "How many of the touched fight for Scenaria?" He said it to irate the Alitarians. In Modini, touched meant talented, not crazy as it did in Alitarian. Sadin was oblivious. "There's a man and woman in the Cenarian lines, both trained, standing together, several others untrained." "And among the Syrian raiders?" "I haven't seen the Syrians since they went around that bend." The other young Alitarian, Jaden, looked unhappy. He was the identical twin of the young seer, with the same handsome features, same floppy black hair, and totally different gifts. "Why are they being so stupid?" he asked. "We all saw the Lanat army come up from the south. 5,000 lancers who hate the Caledonians more than anything. Why don't the Cenarians wait until they get here?" "They might not know the Lanat are coming," Lord Lucius said. "Or they might not be coming. They might be waiting to pick off the victor. Or Tara Grayson might want all the glory for herself," Wervel suggested. Jaden couldn't believe it. "We aren't just going to sit here, are we? By the light, the Cenarians will be destroyed. 20 meisters, we can take them. I'm good for 3 or 4. I know the rest of you are as good or better." "You forget our mission, child Jaden," Lord Lucius said. "We haven't been sent to fight in anyone's war. The Caledonians aren't a threat to us." "The Caledonians are a threat to everyone," Jaden protested. "Silence!" Jaden cut off, but the defiance on his face didn't alter a whit. The Cenarian line began moving at a slow jog, allowing the army, like an enormous beast, to gain momentum. Sadin twitched. Did any of you feel that?" he asked. "What?" Wervel asked. I don't know, like an explosion." "May I go see what the Syrians are doing, Lord Lucius?" "We need our eyes on the battle. Watch and learn, child. We have a rare opportunity to see how the Caledonians fight. You too, Jaden." The Caledonian army was formed in loose ranks, with space between every warrior for an archer. The archers readied themselves now, each putting arrows in the ground where they could be grabbed quickly. In the front of everyone, the 2-man teams of meisters sat on horseback. To the seers, they glowed. "What will they do, Sadin?" Lord Lucius asked. "Fire, sir, and lightning second." "And why?" "Because it will scare the shit out of the Cenarians. The effects on morale, sir," Sadin said. The Cenarian line was still jogging forward. They were 400 paces away now. The group under General Aegon had advanced to the fore and split. But they didn't just split into 1 or 2 or even 3 groups. His few horsemen and his foot soldiers formed a fragmented line as long as the Cenarian front. "The hell is he doing?" one of the Alitarians asked. For a long moment no one answered. He couldn't hope to break the Caledonian line with such a ragged line of his own. His move also left a gap in the Cenarian center, but even as the men watched, another of the Cenarian generals, Duke Westeros, ordered his men into the gap. It's genius. He minimizes his losses, Wervil said. For a moment no one asked. If there was one thing Magi hated more than not understanding something, it was not understanding something after someone had understood it first and had given them a hint. What? Jaden asked. Think like a Meister, child. You've had enough for what, 5, 10 fireballs before you're spent? Usually you'll kill 2 to 5 men with each fireball. With a line this thin, you'll kill 1. You might even miss completely. Aegon knows he's gambling. If the main line comes to support his line too late, his first line will be slaughtered. But if they hit within 5 or 10 seconds, he'll have saved hundreds and nullified the effects on morale. It looks like, we found a general who knows how to fight Meisters. There might be hope for Cennaria after all. At 200 paces, the line picked up speed. The archers in the Caledonian lines loosed their first volley, and a flock of 2,000 black-feathered arrows took flight. For a long second they darkened an already bleak sky, casting the shadow of death across the dawn. When they dove back to earth, they buried their barbed beaks in earth and armor and the flesh of men and horses. Again, the dispersed ranks saved hundreds. But up and down the Cenarian line, men flopped over onto the stubbly field, going from a full sprint to the rest of death in an instant. Others fell injured, legs or arms pierced, and were trampled by their friends and countrymen a moment later. Horses lost riders and continued the charge merely because the horse to the right and left still charged. Riders lost horses and pitched to the earth at great speed, sometimes flying free of the saddle and rising to run with their earthbound comrades, sometimes getting caught in the saddle and crushed beneath their horse's body. The Caledonian army performed as only veterans can. The archers loosed as many arrows as they could in a few seconds. Then, as a flag went up, each grabbed his remaining arrows and retreated. There were perfect lines in the ranks to allow each archer to get to the back behind the spearmen and swordsmen who would protect them from the melee. As they retreated without even a separate order being given, the rear lines filled in the gaps the archers had left. The maneuver was nothing special, but the speed at which the army carried it out with thousands of enemies sprinting toward it was. The Meisters loosed fire, their original plan in shambles. Some of the Meisters hurled balls of fire at the charging horses, while others, still hoping for the effect of running into a firestorm, swept gouts of fire across the stubbly fields. What would have ordinarily broken up and disoriented an entire line in the crucial seconds before impact didn't even slow the Cenarians. The crash of the lines was distinctly audible to the Magi, even as far away as they were. Men and horses impaled themselves on spears, and their momentum carried them into the Caledonian ranks. Others crashed full force into Caledonian shields and sent men sprawling, but the Cenarians in the first rank must have been veterans. In most armies, no matter what their commanders told them, many of the men would slow before that last impact. The idea of crashing full force into a line bristling with swords and spears was too viscerally paralyzing for most men. These had no such doubts. They burst into the Caledonian line with all their might. It was an awesome and fearful sight. But they were almost swallowed up before the main body of the Cenarian line hit the Caledonians. The shock of it rippled through the entire Caledonian line, pushing them back a good 10 feet. On their horses, the Meisters laid about themselves with fire and lightning, but far behind the Cenarian front lines, archers on horseback were hunting them, riding back and forth, stopping, shooting arrows from short bows and moving on. The shots seemed impossible, a short bow killing from 200 or 300 paces. Seyden checked the archers again, but they weren't talented, he was sure of it. To Seyden it was like watching candles being snuffed out, one at a time, as Meisters toppled from their saddles. The lines heaved back and forth and disintegrated into 1,000 clumps of individual combat. Horses wheeled and stamped and kicked and bit. Meisters burned holes in men, set fire to others, laid about themselves with cudgels or swords of pure magic, and sometimes fell dead, pierced by arrows. In 5 minutes, 17 of the 20 Meisters were riddled with arrows, and the Caledonian line was stretching in the middle. The giant Cenarian who had led the first charge seemed to be a beacon of hope. Wherever he went, the Cenarians pushed to go there too, and now he was pushing to cut all the way through the Caledonian line. Seyden muttered an oath. "Where did they come from?" he asked. The Magi followed his eyes. Rank upon rank of Caledonian Highlanders were forming up, to each side of the battlefield. The caves, Wervel said. What are they doing? The Highlanders spread out and jogged toward the flanks and back of the battle. There were at least 500 of them, but they didn't charge into the battle. They didn't seem at all disturbed that they were losing the advantage of surprise. They spread their line thinner and thinner, as if to cut the entire rear of the battle. Sir, Sadin said, I thought you only tried to surround an enemy if you outnumbered him. Lord Lucius looked disturbed. He was looking to the back of the Caledonian line, where the Verdmeisters were gathered. What is that chain between the Verdmeisters? That isn't, one Magus said. Surely not. They're just legend and superstition. May the god have mercy, Wervel said. It is.